Welcome to the Digital Planning Podcast. This series is designed to educate individuals about all things digital in connection with estate planning, business planning, and estate administration. To keep up with all things digital, please subscribe at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you download your podcasts. And now, Jennifer Ziegel, a partner at Kleinbart LLC, Ross Bruck, a principal of Estate Genie, and Justin Brown, a partner at Pepper Hamilton LLP, with today's topic.
Today, Jen will provide an overview of digital assets and lay a foundation of what are digital assets and why digital asset planning is so important. So Jen, what are digital assets?
Thank you, Justin. So digital assets can be defined as an electronic record in which an individual has a right or an interest. Right now, that term doesn't generally include the underlying asset or liability unless that asset or liability is itself an electronic record. Digital assets are not your computer, smartphones, or iPads. Digital assets are all of the pieces of information stored on these devices, which also include digitally stored content, online accounts, and files stored on digital devices, and of course, accounts maintained and managed online.
Okay, so Jen, I get that things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, they're clearly digital assets. But can you go into a little bit more explanation of some of the other types of digital assets? What about pictures or information or email accounts and data stored on my smartphone?
Absolutely. There are so many digital assets, and most people don't even realize the amount of digital assets that they have collected. Right now, there are 5 generally accepted categories of digital assets. The first is electronic documents, which is data stored on a digital device, in a cloud, or in another software sharing platform. You also have your social media outlets. This is Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Shutterfly, and Instagram accounts, among others. So then we have financial assets, which is financial information stored on digital devices or an account maintained and managed online. Of course, we also have the Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies, PayPal and Amazon accounts, eBay accounts, Venmo, and any other type of account that's associated with a monetary value. There are also business accounts. This would include customer information, databases, trademarks, trade secrets, websites, domain names, Dropboxes, employee information stored online, marketing, sales, emails, calendars that are all connected to the internet or some other software database. And then you have your miscellaneous category of digital assets, which would include online gaming, iTunes, Pandora, Kindle, loyalty programs, YouTube, Apple iCloud accounts, and airline miles.
So it sounds like everyone has some type of digital asset. Why is it so important to plan for digital assets, either personally or for your business?
It's extremely important to plan for these types of assets, and as our physical lives become more intertwined with our online presence, it's important to ensure wishes are followed with the management, transfer, and disposal of digital assets. But I'll qualify that, because not all digital assets are capable of being transferred. But we'll talk about that more later. It's also important to make sure assets are properly identified and inventoried to avoid an unnecessary loss. Some digital assets have a monetary value, which we've discussed, and others have sentimental value, which is priceless. If assets are not identified, it could almost be impossible to find. Pictures, videos, email messages of a loved one could be forever lost if the source storing these items is not disclosed. Likewise, digital assets with a monetary value can also cause an economic loss if the asset is unknown. Planning for digital assets makes the transfer and disposal of digital assets easier at the death or incapacity of a loved one. It also avoids unnecessary delays and can safeguard against identity theft. Most people have multiple devices, smartphones, iPads, computers, all of which have different saved and stored information and different passcodes. Online fraud and identity theft is at an all-time high, and it's only expected to increase. Planning can decrease the chance of identity theft both before and after death.
Can you talk a little bit about cryptocurrencies and private keys? That seems to be something that we as estates practitioners are not frequently exposed to?
Absolutely. Planning for most cryptocurrencies is more complex and requires an understanding of the underlying blockchain technology. So blockchain can be defined as a digital database containing information, records and financial statements or other types of data that can be simultaneously used and shared within a large, decentralized, and publicly accessible network without any central authority. So what this means is that no government can shut down someone from using a blockchain, no bank can revoke an account on a blockchain network. It is completely decentralized. And each block on the chain includes data and information that is then verified and validated before being added to the chain. Once a block is added, the transactions are permanently recorded on the distributed ledger. So blockchains are composed and supported by thousands of computers that can be all around the world. And these computers that support the network are called nodes. And they're maintained by individual operators. And each node has a copy of the entire digital ledger. And there's many different types of blockchain networks, and that's only going to exponentially grow. The underlying technology of blockchain relies on cryptography, and each participant is identified by a public and a private key, and users' identity can remain anonymous. For instance, the public key is similar to a mailbox. Anybody could have this information, and people can send information to the address associated with the public key. However, the private key is needed to actually open the mailbox and see what information has been sent. And keys are essentially alphanumeric codes that unlock the information stored on the chain. And there is no one central physical location that this information is stored on. It lives and exists in the distributed ledger. Bitcoin and many other digital currencies, in general, utilize blockchain technology to record transactions between parties efficiently and in a transparent and verifiable manner. And since there are thousands of nodes that support blockchain networks and they all have a copy of the ledger, it is not subject to manipulation, and most public blockchains are also not subject to hacking.
So going back to the private keys, what happens if a private key is lost or somebody dies without telling anyone where the private key is located?
Big problems can be created by not properly planning. There's lots of different ways private keys can be stored. Some public exchanges that are used to trade cryptocurrencies can hold the private keys for account holders. But an individual can also hold their own private key in various different ways. They can use software programs that have digital wallets associated with them. They can also use hard wallets, which are nano memory sticks or USB drives, where that alphanumeric code can be stored. Some people choose to print out or write out their private keys and store them in safe deposit boxes or other secure locations. Depending on the technological savviness of a user, there are many other different ways that private keys can be stored. We're also going to continue to see an evolution in how private keys can be stored. Samsung recently announced that the new Galaxy 10 phone will have a built-in crypto wallet specifically to store keys and other information. The bottom line is that if there is no private key, there is no ability to access the cryptocurrency. And this is why it's so important to provide estate planning and business planning for companies and individuals who have or utilize cryptocurrencies and other digital assets.
Jen, can you give us any examples where there could have been better planning and any lessons that we can learn for the future?
Absolutely. So recently in the headlines, there's been a lot of news about the Canadian cryptocurrency exchange Quadringa CX. And the exchange was owned by a gentleman named Gerald Cotton, who suddenly passed away in December of 2018. And unfortunately, he died without leaving a roadmap to access the $190 million in client funds that the exchange controlled. And he held these client funds in cold storage, which means the private keys were held in a offline vehicle and not on the actual public exchange. And he did not leave any means or roadmaps as to how to access the cold storage where the private keys were held that are necessary to access $190 million in client assets. This is a huge problem and is akin to a second Mt. Gox. And Mt. Gox was a cryptocurrency exchange in Japan that was hacked a number of years ago, and millions of dollars of cryptocurrency were lost. Now here we don't have a hack, but we do have the mismanagement by Mr. Cotton of the private keys held by the exchange. And it's almost equivalent to a hack, since he didn't properly plan for how to access this information and these assets. There's some speculation around the death of the owner, which is very interesting, that he may not actually truly be dead, but nothing's been confirmed along those lines. It is also very sad for the clients of Quadringa CX who now may never have access to their funds.
Well, thanks, Jen, for giving us an overview of digital assets and laying the foundation of planning to come. We hope that everybody enjoyed our discussion today on digital assets. Please be on the lookout for our next podcast, where we'll be discussing estate planning with digital assets.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Digital Planning Podcast, the podcast designed to educate individuals about all things digital in connection with estate planning, business planning, and estate administration. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave us a rating or review at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you download your podcasts. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.